past 3 days, the call has been the same from Washington, D.C. for people across the nation and the globe to unite in the fight against violent extremism. A summit on that topic just wrapped up today in Washington. More than 60 nations were represented, along with experts from across the U.S., including several from Boston. And throughout the 3 days, the message from President Obama was the same.
Nations need to break the cycles of conflict, especially sectarian conflict, that have become magnets for violent extremism. They're not religious leaders, they're terrorists. And we are not at war with Islam. We are at war with people who have perverted Islam.
Two of the many experts who attended this week's summit are Robert Treston, the New England Regional Director of the Anti-Defamation League, and Saidi Abdi from the Refugee Trauma and Resilience Center at Boston Children's Hospital. And they both join me now. Welcome, and welcome back from Washington.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I was looking at the U.S. Attorney's report that she presented in Washington before today's show. And to my eye, it was both very broad and very abstract. So I want you each to help me understand, what will this initiative mean for you in the coming months? Robert, what will the ADL be doing? And Saida, what sort of work will you be doing at Children's as a result of this?
So I think one of the takeaways from the framework that this group developed, and the reason why I think you have this reaction that it's broad, is that in Boston we took a multidisciplinary and really holistic approach. And I think the people that worked on it came from a cross-section of different communities. And we took an approach that it's not necessarily a Muslim problem in Boston, but it's really a Boston community problem. It's an American issue and it's a global issue. And so that's why our approach was quite broad. I think from the ADL perspective, there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And because it doesn't impact just one community, we need to be taking approaches from a lot of different perspectives. The Jewish community in particular is the #1 target for radical Islamists. Who the president made it clear that we're not at war with Islam, but we are at war with some of the people who are attacking democratic ideals. And there's three things in common when they make these attacks. They go after Jews, they go after law enforcement, and they go after democratic ideals.
Said, I want to get you in here because you are both a member of the Somali community and a care provider who will be working to implement the goals of this initiative. So how will your job sort of change in the months to come or the years to come as a result of this pilot program launching here in Boston? What will you be doing?
First of all, I actually want to comment on the question of the broadness of it and the way the framework looks. I think I am, as you said, a clinician at Children's Hospital. I don't see patients now. I work in a research project that actually looks at youth and violence. And I am in this work because we want to prevent any youth from engaging in violence. But we also want to make sure that our community is not targeted in this framework, that it's not about Muslims. Our community, I think one of the comments that was made in the summit was that the vast number of violence that is committed by terrorists in the U.S. and actually in the world is not committed by Muslims. And we are talking about the United States, in the United States.
I recall the figure 6%.
Yes, exactly, 6%, right? Exactly.
If you looked at the last 10 years, 95% of the extremist murders in the United States in the last 10 years were not committed. They were committed by right-wing extremists.
All right, since we're on this topic, and I still want to hear more if we have time about what you two are going to be doing in the near future to implement the goals of this framework. But since we're talking about the question of how many Muslims should be viewed skeptically or suspiciously as a result of the things the president's talking about, I want to look at the rhetorical balance he tried to strike at this summit. Because to my ear, he walked a very fine line. On the one hand, he said violent extremism is something that can arise in any faith. It's not unique to any faith. But he also said, we're having this summit right now because of a problem in the Islamic world. He mentioned al-Qaeda and the Islamic State. And he went on to say that there is a strain of thought in the Islamic world that is problematic, more broadly speaking. Let's take a listen to how he framed it.
There's a strain of thought that doesn't embrace ISIL's tactics, doesn't embrace violence, but does buy into the notion that the Muslim world has suffered historic grievances. Sometimes that's accurate. Does buy into the belief that so many of the ills in the Middle East flow from a history of colonialism or conspiracy. Does buy into the idea that Islam is incompatible with modernity or tolerance, or that it's been polluted by Western values. And so those beliefs exist. In some communities around the world, they are widespread.
So what did you two think of that balance the president was trying to strike? Did he do it right? Did he do a good job?
Well, I think the president is in a different position than the two of us, because he has a global perch, but I think he tried to strike that balance, and I think he made a very important point, which is that we are not at war with Islam, but we are at war with the people that are exploiting it and that are using it to justify violence, and it is important to name them and to call them out.
Saida, as a Somali American, what did you think of what the president had to say there?
I think it was really impressive. He said more than just that we have to strike that balance. It's the only way we can actually do this work. I think that the president and also our attorney here, Ortiz, are trying very hard to actually take an approach that may work.
Why do you say may work?
Because I think that those who are trying to push them to a corner and say, label someone, label the Muslims, let's imprison the Muslims, let's attack them, which I have heard actually on TV, let's kill them, this is the Muslim problem. What they present is that they want us to use the same tactics that those who are actually committing those violence are using. And I think that it's just going to polarize us and make us actually even more vulnerable.
Since you mentioned that, I want to quote what the head of the Islamic Society of Boston Cultural Center had to say. He was quoted in the Boston Globe today, Yusufi Vali, saying, "The data show that violent extremism is an extremely rare phenomena. For the government to offer us services based on concerns of violent extremism in our community seems to reinforce the same stereotype that society holds of American Muslims, that they or Islam are inherently violent." So he took issue with Carmen Ortiz's report, with the president's framework or the president's framing of the issue. What about his criticisms? Sounds to me like you're sympathetic to them, or you understand the source of his concern if you don't agree with his conclusion. Is that fair?
I actually wouldn't even say I don't agree with his conclusion. I think one of the big issues that we have in this discourse around this issue is that it seems to be that it has to be one side or another. I think actually what the president was trying to do is exactly what Yusuf is saying, which is that we have to have this balance between protecting ourselves against terrorism and ensuring that the rights of our own citizens are not violated. This initiative, I think no one is saying right now as we started that it is perfectly formed. I think what I will say personally for myself is that the way that our Attorney General adopted is a way that says...
You mean Carmen Ortiz, the U.S.
Yes, yes, sorry.
But it's also important, though, to recognize that the targets of a lot of the extremists right now, and one of the things that we acknowledged in our framework is the use of social media that is being used to target and recruit vulnerable people within the American Muslim community, and in fact around the world. And I think we need to recognize that, and we need to have concrete a counter narrative that puts forth a different view, a different version of Islam, a different version of democracy, to counter the incredible pressure that's being put upon now to recruit people to commit violence.
I'm really glad that you brought that up. Saida, in Boston, in the Somali community, how much pressure would you say is being applied by maybe foreign radical groups to young, impressionable individuals? Is there a sort of a recruitment effort going on? And also, what's the response been in the Somali community to this pilot program in Boston?
I think that the Somali and the Muslim community have all been both concerned and suspicious. So I'm answering the last question first.
Yeah, that's
both
great.
Very concerned and very suspicious, and I think that's what Yusufi's comment refers to. In Minnesota, it is the same. And you know what? There is a history here, and the history that the last initiative that was undertaken by the federal government in Minnesota actually led to surveillance, and so the surveillance and the community outreach were embedded in each other, which the community didn't know, and this has been made public and has been acknowledged already. And there is a lot of suspicion, but there is never been unwillingness to actually look at this issue. We are, even the Muslims who
so there is a willingness to look at this issue?
Yes, there has never been an unwillingness, that no one has ever, the community has never said, I myself, so now I'm going to go to my children's role. At Children's Hospital, at Center for Refugee Trauma, we undertook actually a research project. We have worked with the Somali community for a long time, and for over 10 years, and we undertook a research around this issue, and the community have been very supportive, have stepped up, because we looked at it as a part of a holistic look at what makes you vulnerable to any kind of violence, which is what I think Robert is also talking about.
All right, Saeed Abdi, we have to leave it there, unfortunately. Please come back. Robert Treston, please come back as well, and thank you both for being here today.
Thank you.
Thank you.